President. Members will please remain standing while the Chief Executive enters the chamber. Chief Executive. The Chief Executive will first address the Council. Madam President, I'm very pleased to meet members again today. My policy address is entitled Proactive, Ethic and Always People First.
And this is the foundation of a strong governance. However watertight and resolute the government policies are, for the policies to achieve the desired result, it is important to be people-based policies which have regard to people's actual needs and aspirations are policies that naturally command public support. Every year, the policy address is a process of forging consensus. For instance, before this policy address was formulated, I engaged different sectors in the community for consultation. I listened to the views of political parties in different sectors. I've had 30-odd consultation sessions, and then I moved on to consider all the priority areas and the details. I hope that this will build consensus, and on this basis we will be able to come up with a blueprint that can push for greater development. The philosophy of governance differs from person to person. I emphasize pragmatism. Policies are not about dwelling on the abstract or ideological debates. We have to pragmatically come up with specific solutions to specific problems. We have to move on with time and optimize our policies. Not only should we have visions, we should also have means of implementation. I'm sure that the balance between policy ideas and their implementation lies in a spirit of pragmatism. Pragmatism is a matter of attitude to solve problems. It's not a matter of political belief. My ideas do not differ from yours. We all hope that economically, politically, socially, and in terms of quality of life, we would be able to achieve progress. But as Chief Executive, responsible for the executive arm of the government, I have the responsibility to make sure that we can implement these ideas instead of merely sloganeering and miss all the opportunities. So we have to be proactive in our policies. I have 8 months left on my tenure. I will adopt the attitude of tackle problems where they are and resolve all the short-term problems. I will also try to share with the public my views regarding long-term challenges in Hong Kong, including how we can move on with times, how we can build consensus on the constitutional development, how we can strike a balance between development and environmental benefits, and how we can handle the negative sentiments of the grassroots in building a harmonious society. I hope that we can go hand in hand with courage and pragmatism to resolve all the problems facing Hong Kong. I am convinced that with this, on this basis, we should be able to scale new heights. Madam President, I'm happy to take questions. The Chief Executive will now answer questions on the policy address raised by members. A member whose question has been answered may, if necessary and for the purpose of elucidation only, ask a short follow-up question. Mr. Andrew Ching. Thank you, Madam President. Chief Executive, in terms of strong governance, you put forward the GST, which is a bitter pill to swallow, and a bitter pill may not be a good medicine. Definitely, it is very bitter. This GST is a bitter pill, and given the widening gap between the haves and the have-nots, everybody might have to be robbed by the government. The poorer they are, the worse they would become, and they will have to swallow the bitter pills as a result. Mr. Chief Executive, you said that your policies have to be people-oriented and people-based. If 70% of the people are of the opinion that the GST is a non-starter, and 70% of the people think that the government should go down the legislative route regarding minimum wage. Why is it that the government doesn't do anything which is truly people-based, and why do you have to ram the GST down people's throat? Chief Executive. Mr. Ching got two questions, the GST and also the minimum wage policy. This is a double-barrel question. The GST is not a new topic. The reason why we put forward the GST are explained very clearly on many occasions. This is an issue we have been studying for about 6 years. And many international organizations like the IMF told Hong Kong that we have a very narrow tax base. After the financial turmoil in Asia, it will be difficult to recover if the tax base is not broadened, and the rating is also likely to be compromised. After careful consideration and after deliberation by a committee, we put this to the public domain to discuss with the public. And this is the right time with the aging and graying population and with all the demands from the public. The public expenditure on education, medical sphere, and social welfare and so on would be going nowhere but up. And if the economy were to take a downturn, we have to make sure that we're well prepared. The public is aware that we have a balanced budget and the sentiments are getting better. I think it is time for us to have some rational discussion. We in the government has the obligation to put this to the public domain for discussion, and we should not do anything which is applauded by the public. But at the end of the day, after deliberation, should this go ahead, I think this is in the hands of the Legislative Council, not in the hands of the government. All these tax revision and tax reforms and so on are in the hands of the Legislative Council. And members like us will have to face the reality. We have to face up to the aging population, the narrow tax base, and so on. If there are problems like these, how are we going to resolve them? Short of GST, what other measures are available to us? You've got a point, Mr. Cheng, that about 70% of the people in Hong Kong are against this because of the tax increase, but 80% of the people told you that we should continue with our discussion in order to find a solution. I hope the members would join me in coming up with a solution in the spirit of cooperation. We have to resolve the problems on behalf of the public. We cannot shy away from any discussion. By the same token, if we have to implement minimum wage by legislation, we have to get the endorsement of the Legislative Council. When it comes to electrical endorsement, it would take a bit of time. It would take time to build consensus. I'm sure that the labor sector, Ms. Chen Yinhan, is also aware when the workers are in deep trouble, that they have to be protected against any exploitation. There is a lack of consensus. Any bill that comes to the Legislative Council will be sitting here for a couple of months, pending all the amendments. If the employers are minded to exploit the minority, they can continue to do so. I think right now the government has the determination to come up with some ways and means to get something done to protect workers in two sectors. And at the same time, we're telling the employers that if they are not in compliance, if the employers, however in the minority they are not protecting the interests of the workers, we'll do something about it. The whole movement would cover the federations, the unions, and the security guards and so on. We tell them the wages on a quarterly basis, and there will be written employment contracts which will protect the interests of the workers, and nobody would know how much they should get paid. And the minority who fall below the good practices would be identified, and the workers would get protected. If after a lapse of some time we simply cannot get it done, that's another matter. I'm sure the majority of the employers in Hong Kong are good employers. After some time, if this doesn't work, we can consider going down the route of legislation. If they do not act in accordance with the movement, then we can consider legislation. If you want to get this done, we have to have a consensus. Until we have a consensus here in this chamber, this is the best way forward. And immediately we will be able to protect the interests of the workers with the monitoring of the media, with the monitoring of the public, and also with the efforts put in by the Labour Department, with the hotline available for reporting, and also with the standard contractual terms. I'm sure that we can go ahead with it. I hope that members would approach this issue with common sense. If we have to go down the legislative route, it would take a couple of months for drafting, and we are going to have however many months of debate. And in the meantime, the recalcitrant employers will be minded on exploiting the workers. Who's going to benefit from it? I've drawn on for too long. Sorry, Madam President. Mr. Cheng. Well, to save time, Madam President, I'd like to follow up on the GST. My question, the thrust of my question, is that the GST has caused a lot of opposition, and it might dampen the consumption desire. The retail industry, the restaurant, the catering sector might suffer. You said that this will come back to the Council for debate. The majority, I'm sure, here in this chamber are against this idea. I think you should reconsider this proposal, and together with the Financial Secretary, put this consultation paper on hold, and rather channel your energy and your efforts into areas like the Fair Competition Bill, Blue Sky campaign, and also the minimum wage and so on, in order to foster a better harmony. Thank you. Thanks very much. Mr. Abraham Shek. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Chief Executive, my sector supports the policy address. This always people first theme will certainly help Hong Kong to scale new heights. For the construction industry, we are quite worried about one thing I've told you many times before. Unemployment stands at 11% in the construction trade. The policy address doesn't specifically mention any particular action, but I'm sure the Chief Executive would be concerned about the unemployed in this sector, because some of them do not even have any minimum wage. So within the 8 months left on your tenure, I hope that you would create more jobs for them. Over the past couple of years, the government spent $29 billion on infrastructure, but in 05-06, $20.5 billion was spent. And many workers simply cannot find any job opportunities as much as they want to. So how are you going to resolve this problem, Chief Executive?
I think there are two aspects. Now, of course, we have public investment as well as private investments. Now, for the government, some major projects have been completed and others to start, so that's the problem. I am sure I will get the support of members concerning the TAMA project. It will be launched in due course, and the project will create a few thousand jobs. And then concerning the Olympic Games, we're going to upgrade our existing facilities, and we're going to build new facilities. And these projects will also create jobs. And then the East Kowloon Development Project, I hope that after the consultation period, we'll be able to come up with a new development blueprint. And if that blueprint is endorsed by the public, then I hope that in the coming year, we're going to have a few projects launched. For example, the new sports complex, the new cruise terminal. All these will bring job opportunities. But then, Mr. Abraham Sheck, may I refer you to paragraph 70 of my policy address. These are matters that we should be concerned about. Concerning our development, some people think that economic development and environmental cultural conservation are mutually exclusive. Now, in fact, we have the funds to launch the projects. But then it is true that the pace of public investment in infrastructural projects is slower than expected, and I think we really need a consensus among various parties. Because some people may think the development may not be good. We want a pitch. We want only short buildings, not high-rise buildings. So I think we really need to come up with a consensus with green groups and the relevant parties, and we should all proceed from a constructive angle. Now, we want to maintain our economic competitiveness, and that's why we really need to continue to invest. Mr. Abraham Sheck. Chairman, I thank the CE for his detailed explanation. With regard to the outstanding municipal council projects, I hope that they can be expedited. Yes, we're doing our best. But then concerning those outstanding projects, now in fact some of them are not projects as such. We only have the name, but then the sites have not been chosen. But then I will follow up on the projects. I have personally followed up on a few projects, and I hope that we can strengthen our investments in this regard in future. Mr. Malik. Mr. Malik, please continue. Thank you very much, President. The CE, in his policy address, said that there would be an education voucher system for the early childhood education sector. We welcome this move, but can I ask the CE why you have decided to opt for the education voucher mode? Because at the moment we have a direct subsidy mode for public education. So why is it that you are introducing this new concept? The reason is that I want to achieve the best effects using limited resources, and the choice is with the parents. I respect the parents in Hong Kong. They know what is best for their kids, and I think they can exercise their choice. So that's the starting point. And also, now for the other sectors of our education system, they are mature, and so I think I should do something in the early childhood education sector. And also, if I use the conventional mode, then the government's involvement will inevitably be bigger. because I hope that for the salaries of teachers, for the management of the kindergartens, they can be left to the kindergartens themselves. But then we want the kindergartens to be transparent. We want them to tell the parents how many % of the teachers are qualified, how many of them have degrees. And also, if we opt for this approach, we'll be able to start things going in this next academic year. So we have the money following the students, so to speak. And if this approach proves to be effective, then will you apply such an approach to the primary sector and also to the secondary sector? Now, we have no such plans. Now, for kindergartens, in fact, that's not part of our compulsory education system. So kindergartens are different from primary education and secondary education. Now, the government has the responsibility to provide 9-year free and compulsory education for our children. But then for kindergartens, it's not compulsory. Some parents may not want their children to start studying at the age of 2 or 3. Some parents would prefer their kids to start studying at 4 or 5. So the parents know what is best for their kids. Now, there are many kids who are 3 years old and who are not prepared for going to school. So in fact, it's a voluntary arrangement, not a compulsory arrangement. So kindergartens are very different from primary and secondary education in nature, and we have no intention to extend this arrangement to those sectors. Mr. Joseph Lee. Thank you, President. Now, CE, in your policy address, you did not mention anything about policies for the elderly. Last year, LegCo reached a consensus on the issue of healthy aging. So can you apply the education voucher concept to the medical sector? In other words, can you offer medical vouchers to our elderly people so that they can receive regular health examinations and inspections? Concerning how we can help the poor, how we can take care of, or how can we take care of the elderly. Now, I think I should proceed from the family angle. Now, we should take care of the children in the families, elderly people in the families, and if families need assistance, the government should try to help them. You talk about the concept of a medical services voucher. I think that should be looked at in the context of health financing. Now, in fact, within government, we haven't really come up with a package yet. Yes, elderly people need medical services. And of course, we can consider your suggestion. But we need to have massive amounts of financial resources and medical resources to support such a concept. And let's look at our demographic structure. Our population is aging. So how can we cope with our future challenges? So I think your suggestion can be looked at in the context of health financing. Mr. Timothy Kwok. CE, you said that a film development council would be set up to assist the development of our film industry. I'm sure the film industry welcomes the establishment of this council. The industry wants a better business environment. They want Hong Kong to be developed into a film center, and they also hope to benefit more from CEPA. Yes, thank you. Under the CEPA framework, the SAR government has discussions with the central authorities concerning how Hong Kong films can be distributed in the mainland. And for our Cantonese films, I hope that they can be given special treatment in the two provinces of Guangdong and Guangxi. So we're going to try to do something in this regard. Concerning setting up a statutory council, I think this shows that the government attaches importance to this industry. We know that there is potential for development. We want to see a flourishing film industry in Hong Kong. So we are going to work hand in hand with those in the industry. And there are also other proposals, for example, assistance concerning the production of films, but then these are controversial issues because the government may be dragged into business operations. So that's why we still have to study these suggestions. And the government will be considering the matter and will try to come up with the best solution. Thank you.
Mr. Kwok. Well, the council would be mainly composed of people from the industry. I'm sure they would feel reassured. I have devoted coverage to these in my policy address. We have to identify the needs of the film industry. When we engage in these activities, we have to weigh up the prices that we have to pay, but we are determined to help the film industry in the way of film production and film distribution and do what we can for the industry. Mr. KK Fong. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I am more disappointed with this policy address compared with the previous one because it doesn't mention any poverty alleviation. We have the Commission on Poverty Alleviation, and like $13 million would be earmarked for social enterprises, but the number of people who can be helped would be very minimal. According to government statistics, those earning the median wage stands at 170,000 households. In Tin Shui Wai and Yuen Long, the situation is getting worse than last year. In terms of age, between 0 to 5 and 15 to 19, the number of people who are poor has increased. In the policy address, what policies or what measures are there to tackle people caught in poverty? The $30 million worth of social poverty cannot really cope with the 170,000 households who are caught in poverty. Chief Executive. Well, what Mr. Fong said is a big challenge for a financial center like Hong Kong. In the policy address, I referred to the three important challenges. First, as the economy does better, there are some people in the financial services, in the high-tech services, who can make quite a bit of money, but those with low education attainment are still struggling. It's not simply a matter of basic livelihood, it's a matter of an income gap in Hong Kong. Nowhere else can come up with effective measures to tackle this problem. We're still exploring measures. But I can tell Mr. Fong that in the policy address, I cannot refer to so many issues. What I can say is what I'm going to do in the remaining 8 months and also the long-term challenges. I may not mention the important initiatives, but that's not the end of the matter. I hope the members would spend a bit of time going through the policy agenda in which all the current initiatives would continue, all the current policies would be carried on, all the pledges would be carried on, poverty alleviation on pages 30, 32, and so on. There is a reference to that. We haven't forgotten about it. In my conclusion in the policy address, I also highlighted this as an important issue to tackle. Mr. Fong, the Poverty Commission has a problem because it is only an advisory committee and the tenure will come to an end by March. Are you going to turn this into a statutory commission with actual powers? Chief Executive. We have to understand what the Commission can do to benefit the public. We may change the setup, the institutional setup. We have to come up with solutions. And I look forward to hearing your views as to how, after institutional changes, we can enhance its effectiveness and so on. I'm sure that the Financial Secretary will be interested to hear what you have to say in this regard. I'm sure that poverty alleviation is our #1 priority. Mr. Kwok Chi-kin, Chief Executive, in the cleaning and security guard industry, some are earning as much as $10 per hour, and they make about $3,000 per month for some of them, or many of them. I'm sure that the Chief Executive agrees that people in these two sectors are earning pitiful salaries, and otherwise we wouldn't do anything about them. Under Cap 63 of the ordinance, there are certain provisions regarding this. If in the ordinance, if the Chief Executive considers that the salaries in a certain sector falls below a certain level, the Chief Executive can legislate. Are you going to invoke the powers under Cap 63 and appoint the trade committees in order to come up with a minimum wage for these two sectors? Well, you refer to that particular ordinance that was enacted about 60 years ago. In 1940s, it was never used after its enactment. I glanced through the provisions there. Many of them are indeed anachronistic, and they are not in line with the current times. So if we invoke the provisions there, it would be very difficult for us to do anything, and we would be up against a lot of legal challenges. Myself and my legal colleagues did deliberate the matter, and we don't think that this would be a good basis for us to come up with a minimum wage for a certain sector without any legal challenges. Mr. Kwok. Well, I'm not happy with the reply. This may be an old legislation. This may not have been invoked. There are problems with the onus of proof in Section 5 and so on, but I'm not going to dwell on this particular point, although I think that the legislation can be used. I'm not happy with the reply, but I'm grateful to the Chief Executive that Cap 63 will not be invoked to appoint a certain sector specific committee to come up with a minimum wage. That reply does help because we heard about Ms. Chen Yinhan seeking. I'd like to say a big thank you to the Chief Executive. I'm coming to the end of my point. The Chief Executive that Cap 63 will not be invoked. Well, please do not make a statement. You should not talk about what you're going to do. Please be seated. Ms. Margaret, Madam President, thank you. I thought that the policy address is a budget. It reads like a budget. In the conclusion, concluding paragraphs, there is a reference to the 3 challenges. Mr. Chief Executive, sustainable economic development, political system development, and harmonious society, and so on. All these are not challenges for the future. We have been up against all these challenges over the years. To achieve consensus, there are so many diametrically opposed interests involved, and it would take someone in the position of the Chief Executive Office to resolve the problems, to bridge the gap between the diametrically opposed interests. Your question? It seems to me that the chief executive has not done anything in this regard. You talked about the infrastructural development. In your mind, well, Ms. Ng, what's your question? I'm coming to my question, Madam President. The infrastructural development is misconstrued as some confrontation with the Green groups. For you to take this attitude, does it mean that you are not able to resolve the problems? In the days ahead, it may be 6 months, maybe 9 months, but to the people of Hong Kong, it is a long time. Will you change your attitude and not see people as foes and be prepared to consider all the alternative ways proposed? Chief Executive. Well, I hope to say the same thing to Ms. Margaret Ng. You don't take the government proposals as something that is against you. When it comes to public policies, it is important to have to make compromise. If you're not prepared to make any compromise, if you are too set in your thinking, it will not get us anywhere. Say, for instance, with the Tamer project. I remember Ms. Margaret Ng did support the first time around. I'm not sure. I thought that the Electoral Commission endorsed something which is supported by Ms. Margaret Ng. Well, we were talking about the electrical complex, but not the other projects. I beg your pardon. The chief executive is really saying something which is untrue. I don't think you should talk about the Electoral Commission. The chief executive said that I am being inconsistent. I think I need time to do some explanation. I don't think the chief executive should uncover this. Well, I may uncover something else. But if you try to cast aspersion on me, I would certainly reject that. Let me say something else then. After careful consideration, I'm talking about the second challenge, the constitutional development. We did have a fair amount of discussion in the community out there, and in Hong Kong we did have a lot of working group discussions and so on. We did have a majority view, and here we hope that we would be able to have some compromise, but that was not to be. I hope that, and we did revise the proposal and presented them here, and we didn't get the 2/3 majority here. We did do things like that. The third question is about the social harmony. This is a broader issue. There are many bills in relation to welfare and so on. We saw similar things happen. I don't think you should be too stubborn. You should not be too set in your own ways or thinking. Otherwise, there would be no room for discussion. Ms. Margaret Ng. Well, Madam President, the Chief Executive is saying that in terms of environment, the many green groups did come here not so much to object to your proposal, including the WKCD. They did present a lot of alternative suggestions. The way you act is that you think you have heard enough and you present a proposal and you're not prepared to make any modification at all. You talked about the constitutional reform. I mean, the same can be said about that. When you presented the constitutional reform package, the Democrats and many people tried to arrange a meeting with you. The 45 concerned group tried to meet you, but it was you who were against any modification. Chief Executive, you are so reluctant to be receptive to alternative views. This kind of attitude, how capable are you of changing that? I would be prepared to listen to different opinions. If I think that there is a majority view, I would be prepared to make modification in response to these views. But executive authority has to take executive decision, and we have to put things to the vote. In any democratic system, in any legislative assembly, in any system, this is a process that we have to go through, and that's the executive authority of the chief executive. However many rounds of discussions you have and deliberations you have, at the end of the day, we must present the executive views. And at the end of the day, the executive authority would have to present a package and that to the executive branch is the best model. And if you think that this is not acceptable, then it would be very difficult for us. Well, Ms. Margaret NG and members, in this Q&A session, we do seek elucidation, but I mean, there is no reason why we can seek elucidation outside this chamber, because if we allow too many elucidations, it would be difficult for us to go on. Listen, well, I'm aware of the rules, and many people are still waiting, but the chief executive has distorted the picture. If I keep silent, it would be tantamount to me accepting what he said. I'd just like to keep this on record.
Mr. Howard Young, President Xi, the Liberal Party is very concerned about the problem of air pollution. This is a matter of people's livelihood. This problem affects everybody in Hong Kong, and this problem affects Hong Kong's investment environment. Some multinational companies may not want to operate in Hong Kong because of this reason. I'm glad to see what is written in para 52 of the policy address. And I'm very glad to see that for the Pearl River Delta, they are also going to adopt the national 3 standards. I would like to know whether adequate discussions have been conducted with the Guangdong province. For example, when the new emission standards will be implemented. And concerning the use of ultra-low sulfur content fuel, I would like to know whether there will be any synchronization between Hong Kong and Guangdong. In fact, we have been having discussions with the Guangdong province. We've laid down standards. And also they will have to have an adequate supply of ultra-low sulfur diesel. So I really do not know the actual implementation dates, but I understand that they are extremely committed and determined. In fact, in Guangzhou, in Shanghai, in Beijing, they are also eager to adopt the Phase 2 and Phase 3 standards. Mr. Howard Young, the CE doesn't know the exact timetable, but according to para 59, we are moving towards Euro 4. So there will be a lack of uniformity or synchronization. Now, in fact, we are always moving ahead, but then you can't expect the whole of the mainland to follow us very closely. We just hope that places near us can progress speedily. Now, we can do it, and if they are not ready in the mainland, then we should do it first, and we should wait till they are ready, and then we launch the whole thing together. And if they have an adequate supply of diesel, they will be able to start the implementation. So we hope that both the places near us and we in Hong Kong can use diesel with the lowest sulfur content. Mr. Jasper Zhang, positive non-intervention. Now, in the policy address, CE, you said that under the rubric of big market, small government, and public expenditure not exceeding 20% of GDP, there should be discussion in the community as to what extent the government should ever intervene in the market and when. And so can I ask the CE about his view on the government's role, whether the government should intervene in the market, and if so, when and to what extent? I don't think I can give a general answer to this question. That there must be a proposal or a plan. We have to look at when the proposal is put forward. We have to gauge the public's response, and then there can be discussion and then a collective decision made. Now, say for example, back in 1998, we had the Asian financial turmoil. We were facing very serious problems. And the government might have been required to intervene more deeply. But then if there isn't a financial turmoil, then such acts will not be accepted. But before any intervention into the market, there must be very serious consideration. There must be an open discussion. All the merits and demerits should be debated and discussed, and a consensus should be forged in the community. Because if we intervene in the market, we may have to make use of public funds, and we may be talking about the launching of public sector projects, and all these have to be debated in LegCo first before they can be approved. So we can't say this is the benchmark or this is the yardstick, because 2 years later that benchmark may no longer be appropriate because the elements and the components will have changed. So we should look at each proposal, each plan on its own merits. But then, of course, the government must not do what the market is doing. The government must not be taking the lead like what the business is doing. And if things can be done by the market, the government should not try to do it. And public expenditure should not exceed 20% of GDP. This is an extremely good indicator. During the Asian financial turmoil, our GDP shrank, and our public expenditure exceeded 20% of GDP. But now, government expenditure represents only 16% of GDP, and our public expenditure only represents 18% of GDP. But of course, when there are urgent times, there may be public demands for us to do more. President, Mr. Timothy Kwok is concerned about the film industry. So can we use the film industry as an example to see how these principles should be applied? This is a matter for debate. Now, I'm a bit worried because I do not know the details. I think what is important is that we must know the details, and we must also look at to what extent the government should intervene, and there should be a public discussion. Now, I have seen the papers. I'm a bit worried myself because I think the government may not be in the position to intervene. That's why I said just now that we would follow up on the matter. We would continue to study the matter. Mrs. Lina Chow. President, on the 7th of October 2005, Mr. James Tian moved a motion debate on air quality. Mr. Jeffrey Lam suggested that for environmentally friendly vehicles using natural gas and other fuel, there should be tax concessions for such vehicles. CE, we support the concessions that you are offering in the policy address with regard to the vehicles in Hong Kong. And I believe all Hong Kong people want to enjoy cleaner air. Usually the policy address is delivered in October, so funding will be required and LegCo's approval has to be sought, and the entire exercise may take about a year. But then there are only 8 months left concerning your present term. You've proposed very good measures in para 59 and para 60 of the policy address. We'd like to know when they will actually happen. As the Financial Secretary has explained, we want to have low emission vehicles which are efficient in the use of fuel. So we'd like to know when these things will really happen. From the 1st of April onwards, we're going to have a new measure. I understand that legislation will be required, and maybe we need to amend certain subsidiary legislation. And this measure will come into effect on the 1st of April 2007. Mrs. Lina Chow. Now we have many such vehicles. Why is it that we have to wait till the 1st of April next year? As I've said just now, we will need to amend our legislation. So let the Financial Secretary do all his calculations, and then we will also have to amend the regulations. Yes, it's not too long to wait till 1st of April 2007, and you can now place your orders. Mr. Lui Mei-Hua. CE, in the policy address, you mentioned a lot of objectives and goals, and all these have to be backed up by public funds. And then in para 70, we are told that there is one thing that is very important, and that is sustainable or sustained economic development. I agree. You are saying that your priorities for the coming year will be economic development and the creation of wealth. But can you give us more details? With how can we develop the economy, and where will the wealth come from? Now, in order to have more wealth in the community, we need to have revenue from outside Hong Kong. And you're saying that we should also have brand names, good products, and so on and so forth. So, CE, will you consider setting up a committee on industrial development that will be chaired by you and will comprise government officials and academics to formulate policies on industrial development, because we want to see new industries developed and the manufacturing sector developed. Now, previously, we in Hong Kong, we're able to export a lot of products to other countries. We're able to earn income from abroad, and many jobs were created. Now, this subject has been debated many times, Mr. Loy. Talking about industrial development. After the Second World War, we have been moving up the economic development hierarchy. Previously, we had cottage type factories and industrial operations, and then there was industrial development, development of trade, and now we are a service-oriented economy. Our per capita GDP is about $28,000 US. The business sector comprises the best people who know what industries to develop and what business to do. And if we have a committee steering industrial development, that may not bring good effects. Now, for example, clothing. we have been trying to bring certain clothing operations back to Hong Kong. We talked to unionists like Ms. Chan. We said that we would have to bring in labor, but then there are still problems. The industries will develop if there is the room for development. There is no need for the government to play a steering role. And because of CEPA, our products are more competitive, and we now have more direct exports to other places, including the mainland. So the government doesn't need to teach people and tell people what to do. We have this market mechanism, and people can decide what best to do without having to be taught by the government what to do. Mr. Lui Ming-Hua. Yes, I wish to tell the CE this. We in Hong Kong have lost the manufacturing sector, but then in places like Singapore, Switzerland, they have a flourishing manufacturing sector. Why is it that we in Hong Kong can't have such a sector? And then look at South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan. In these places, the government takes the lead. Why can't the government follow suit? Now, we have been talking about whether the government should intervene in the market. We're talking about these basic beliefs and concepts. Now, the government is not omnipotent, and the best scenario will be for the business sector to make the best decisions. Now, in other places, in other areas, they may have different philosophies and different beliefs, and they may be equally successful. But then we have been adopting such a philosophy for decades. And we should not now start to dictate everything. Now, I'm not saying that there is no potential for industrial development in Hong Kong. We will, of course, try to facilitate, to promote, and to give assistance. But please do not ask the government to set up a high-level decision-making committee to steer industrial development and to dictate that certain industries should be developed in Hong Kong. And we should not use public funds to invest in certain industries.
Mr. Ronnie Tong. Madam President, I conducted some surveys in the northern part of the New Territories together with some academics, in particular Yuen Long, Tin Shui Wai, Xiang Shui, Fan Ling, and so on. We found that the working women, on average, earn about $4,800 per month. Over the past 2 years, they went out of a job for 21 months. They would like to have a job, but they couldn't. It would be difficult for them to cross the district to look for jobs because of the enormous traveling expenses. Chief Executive, in the policy address, he talked about economic development in remote areas. The coverage is very minuscule. You seem to be merely saying that in a certain area, if they have any opinions on the economic development, you are prepared to listen. It doesn't mean that you don't think the government can do anything about the problem. Don't you think that women in the northern district are not going to be helped by the family measures that you propose? In terms of the poverty, the gap between the rich and the poor, your measures will not be able to tackle them, and they will not be able to foster a harmonious society. Don't you agree? Chief Executive, I agree, Mr. Tong, that we should do more for the Northern District. In paragraph 49 of the policy address, I acknowledge early
there was a bit of an imbalance in the planning for Tin Shui Wai and for the Northern District. All these package of measures should be carried out as soon as possible, including the
permanent libraries, heated swimming pools, and stadia, the outpatient clinics, basketball courts, and all the ball courts and so on. And the Labour Department also provides counseling for job placement. All these will continue to be done. If people have further opinions, we are prepared to listen. It doesn't mean to say that I'm sitting there doing nothing. We will continue to do all that I said. All these will be followed up. Mr. Tong, well, heated pools and libraries are what you're going to be doing. I hope that the Chief Executive would consider the measures adopted by other countries. In remote areas, you might consider reducing the rates so that local industries can be developed to boost job opportunities, or the traveling subsidy can be extended for people to find jobs across districts. Chief Executive, our pragmatic work, Mr. Tong, is that in Yunlong and North, the Labour Department has 2 placement centres to place people in jobs. We're not devoting resources in the way you suggested. The people of Hong Kong would like to be able to stand on their own feet with some assistance. In Yunlong and in the north, we have expedited we have created the 2 job centres, which is really a success. You might wish to have a look. Mr. Albert Cheng. Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Chief Executive, on the 20th of August, Mr. Albert Ho, not far away from here, was assaulted. Your immediate response was that you would track down the culprit even if he's fled to the end of the world. Where are the culprits? I was a victim of violence. I can feel for Mr. Ho. Mr. Albert Ho is almost fully recovered. Ms. Emily Lau kept pursuing Mr. Dick Lee, and after the policy address has been delivered, many people said that within 8 months you will not be able to do anything, and Mr. Dick Lee, Mr. Number One, said that he's going to be leaving. So where have the culprits fled to? Where is the end of the world that they have fled to? Are you going to continue to pursue the culprits? Chief Executive, we haven't given up at all, Mr. Cheng. We'll continue to do so. I met the Commissioner of Police on a regular basis, whether it's Mr. Chen, Mr. Zheng, or whatever. He or she will continue to do the job there. Madam President, Ms. Emily Lau said that she would pursue Mr. Lee on a monthly basis, but he didn't seem to give a good reply. Maybe she didn't ask in the right tone. If she is courteous enough, it might be different. Dr. Young Sum? Well, Madam President, I'm all about governance. There are 3 challenges according to the Chief Executive: sustainable economic development, constitutional development, and poverty. Governance has to do more than just you, but also the institution. I don't think you would be able to resolve the challenges that you mentioned because of the polarized interests. Many interests are indeed diametrically opposed. We have different ideological thinking. To resolve these problems, there is only one way, and that is you should have the mandate to implement the policies, or you have the majority votes here in this chamber. In other words, you need to have a mandate from the public. You need to have majority votes here, and for this to happen, you need to have universal suffrage for the Chief Executive and also for the LegCo. It's only then that you would be able to achieve what Mr. Diamond said. In absence of any mandate, in absence of any majority votes, you would not be able to do anything. That's the crux of the matter. In this policy address, there is no mention of the timetable for the universal suffrage. To have strong governance, we need to have universal suffrage, because otherwise you would not be able to get anywhere. So are you going to have any breakthrough? You stand a very good chance of being re-elected. Are you going to put forward a timetable for universal suffrage? Chief Executive. Well, unfortunately, within this term, I cannot draft any more policy address. I try to make it brief and succinct. Many people criticize me for not mentioning this or that or the others. I have devoted 7 paragraphs on constitutional development, and the number is not small. I absolutely agree that as far as universal suffrage, this is a common aspiration. This is also in the basic law. And in accordance with the basic law procedures, I'm trying to come up with the best arrangement. I don't think members should come away with the misconception that with universal suffrage, everything would be hunky-dory. If you look at other democratically elected countries, they're also up against all these social problems and problems of one kind or another. I agree that we should work hard together at this at the Commission on Strategic Development. We'll work hard. Unfortunately, in 2007, 2008, we cannot come up with any reforms. The next chance would be 2012. At the CSD, I'm working hard on that. I'm grateful to the Democrats for Democratic Party indeed of coming up with concrete proposals. We need to have open discussions on the pros and cons and whether these proposals can be translated into some sort of concrete models. I think these are pragmatic issues. I won't give up on that. Dr. Young-Sun, well, I don't think the Chief Executive should think of himself as a custodian government. Within 8 months, can't you come up with a timetable for universal suffrage? Chief Executive, if there is a consensus model, we can come up with a roadmap, we can come up with a timetable. But the thing is, we haven't even started with the design. How are we going to elect the Legislative Council? I said that the Democratic Party has got a model, and not everybody subscribes to this. Sir David Akers-Jones came up with something, and not everybody subscribes to that. I hope that more political parties would come up with more proposals in order to achieve a consensus. If we don't even know about the objective, how are we going to move forward? Are we going to turn left, turn right? Are we going to go straight ahead? I am just as concerned as you are. The whole government is just as concerned as you are. We need to get this right. Ms. Emily Lau. Madam President, the design itself is not all that difficult. We hope that there would be universal suffrage, one man, one vote, whether it is proportional representation or not. We like universal suffrage for the Chief Executive. In paragraph 71, there is a reference to the Commission on Strategic Development, which is a black box operation. It says that there is some progress in certain areas, and the work is fulfilling and effective. Last Sunday, there was a workshop. You see my tone is very good, Madam President. In the workshop, there was talk about the differences being narrowed. What has to be done is that the candidate has to be accepted by the central government, and some members suggested that we should present the nominees to the central government for elimination, or alternatively we can have a pre-election for the election committee, or we can have the election committee rejecting certain candidates. Do you call these narrowing differences? Where can we find the aspirations of the whole of Hong Kong in the proposal? I don't think you should complicate the matter, which is very simple, which is universal suffrage. The Democratic Party has got some proposals. I'm sure that if you don't seek to eliminate the candidates, we should be able to come up with a consensus pretty quick. Now, for the CSD's proposals, which are well-known and acceptable, are they going to be presented to the community in the days to come. Any consultation or any government institutions will not be perfect. But I don't think I can agree with you on the term black box operation. The CSD is an open body. We have all the information on the web, and we also want the public to take part in the discussion. We have set up some workshops, and these are some of the proposals put forward. It is not surprising that the differences have been narrowed, but it doesn't mean that we are anywhere nearer a consensus in the community. The proposals are not sufficient. If you have so many suggestions, I hope that you would come up with some model for the CSD to have some workshops to discuss them. If you're not happy with them, we can have more discussions. It's no good for you to say that you work it out, we just want one man, one vote. There are so many ways to go about it. Dr. Young Sum said that the chief executive must have the majority votes here in the chamber. And that hinge on the amendment of the basic law, and I think that would give rise to a lot of controversies. I'm grateful to your concerns over the CSD, Ms. Lau, but your views, your suggestions, I hope that you would channel them to the Constitutional Affairs Bureau or myself. All these issues are issues that we have to discuss. In absence of any consensus, I don't think I would call anything a consensus. We must have a consensus, but no consensus would be perfect for everybody. It would take some compromise on the part of everybody. We have to bear in mind that the model has to be consistent with the basic law. We need to have tripartite agreement, a two-thirds majority in the LegCo. The chief executive has to agree with the proposal, and we also need to have the agreement endorsement of the NPCSC. I don't think we can have any one-sided argument. If we try to go round and round in circle, it might not get us anywhere. I hope that you will be involved in the discussion.
I said the CSD operated in a black box because the meetings were closed meetings. We do not know what discussions have taken place in the CSD, and the members are not representatives elected by the public. And then you said that I did not take part. In fact, the Frontier has provided submissions, and I also met the CE, and I gave you my views. Now, Mr. Tung Chee-hwa only glanced through proposals by certain parties. So I, in fact, took an active part, but to no avail. So it seems that there are only three options. First of all, the central authorities choosing, and then pre-election or pre-selection. So how can you say that differences have been narrowed down? Now, do you know that there is a very big difference between the most conservative views and views on the other end? Now, Ms. Lau, I think what is important is that there must be a package which can get tripartite support and consent. In fact, we are all working hard towards this goal. Now, in fact, it may be easier to get or to forge a consensus within Hong Kong, but we need tripartite consent. We do not want to end up having a constitutional crisis. This is critical. So I think we can be objective. We need not get so agitated. Mr. K.K. Kwok. In fact, it's simple. One man, one vote, universal suffrage. I don't see how the CE can understand this. Now, some people say that the CE is a very good salesman. Yesterday, you tried to sell certain proposals to us. Now, for a good salesman, now you may try to sell quality goods at reasonable prices. That's good. And then for other salesmen, they try to sell substandard goods. And I see two things in the policy address which are related to people's livelihood and which really surprised me. First of all, health financing. Last year, you devoted 2 paragraphs in a policy address to this matter, and this year you are silent on this matter. Then second, political reforms or political arrangements. You talked about what was abstract, you talked about ideological beliefs and so on and so forth. But I hope you remember that you once said in this council that you wanted to see universal suffrage in Hong Kong. And I hope that what you said was neither abstract nor philosophical. Most Hong Kong people, Mr. Kwok, can you please come to your question? Yes, most Hong Kong people do not have the opportunity to be one of the 800 in the election committee to elect you. But then there are many people watching TV now, and can you tell them whether you have this vision concerning universal suffrage, the governance of Hong Kong, and also thorny issues like health financing? Do you have the commitment to resolve these problems? And some people are saying that you are trying to shy away from the important issues and are only dwelling on the trivial matters. Now, in fact, there are a few themes in this policy address, and I concentrate on what I can do and achieve within my term. And I try to give an account of these in a concise manner to LegCo. But not everything that I do can be included in this policy address. Now, I hope that you've already read this book, Policy Agenda, and you can refer to page 34 for health financing. And in fact, I've said in here that we'll continue to pursue the matter. In fact, I admitted very frankly that the government had not come up with a package. And once we've got the package ready, we will put it forward for public discussion. And I don't need to repeat what I have said to Ms. Emily Lau. I have devoted 7 paragraphs in this policy address to political reforms. And I have already told you about the work of the CSD. Now, in fact, this is the main forum for studying political reforms. And I'll continue to do exercise every day. I hope that I will not just drop dead one day, and then I'll be able to see universal suffrage within my days. But then for health financing, you are saying that you will continue to study the matter. In fact, this matter has been studied for a decade. President, I wish to ask the CE one question, and that is, can you give concrete and specific pledges to the public? How are we going to have, or how are we going to reach the stage of universal suffrage in Hong Kong? Please do not try to beat around the bush. And we must have the package, then we'll have to drop the roadmap, and then the timetable. I think that's the most pragmatic approach. Mr. Lee Chok-yan. Thank you, President. When you talked about the wage protection movement, your mentality or thinking was rather confused. Do you think you are Chairman Mao trying to start a revolution, or do you think you are Shi Mingde trying to organize certain movements in Taiwan? You said that irregularities could be reported to the department. But if there is no legislation, how do we know what is in accordance with the law and what is against the law? Because this wage protection movement is only going to be a voluntary movement. So how can we define irregularities? So is it that you want to start a cultural revolution, say, for those employers who exploit their employees, they will be openly reprimanded? Or is it that you want to ask the employees to encircle the employers. So there is no legislation. It's just a voluntary system. In Hong Kong, we have the rule of law, so I'm disappointed. Now, you are the CE. You are not Shi Mingde. You are not Chairman Mao. What you should do is to legislate for a minimum wage. And you are telling us that because if we are to legislate now, we have to wait. We don't know how long we have to wait. But now we don't know how long we have to wait before we will see legislation. So I'm trying to say that he should not try to go down the Cultural Revolution route. In fact, Hong Kong should not operate this way. We shouldn't have people openly reprimanding and criticizing others for things that they should not have done. Now, we need to have a consensus for workers in these two trades. We should set our policies. It is true that there is no legislation, but then the political commitment is clear. Everybody in Hong Kong knows what the government wants to do. Please do not use words like openly reprimanding people. We're talking about reporting. Even if there is legislation, reports on malpractices will still have to be made to the government. And if people act unlawfully, of course, they will be criticized. And this is a voluntary movement, but then there will be monitoring by the public. I am confident. For written contracts of have legal e-finding, and if employers and the workers will not benefit. That's my belief. You may not agree. But then as we have this voluntary movement, then we can step up publicity, we can have administrative measures, and then employers, building owners committees. Now, they will know the government's policy, and then people will know the market rates for the guarding service and the cleaning sector. And if there are malpractices, reports will be made. Please do not liken this to the Cultural Revolution. No, but there is no legislation. The problem is that there is no legislation. You're saying that there is no need for legislation. A policy will be sufficient. So, electoral members, in the future, there is no need to legislate. A government policy will suffice. A government policy can solve all the problems. You are saying that the public should reprimand and criticize these employers and their malpractices. Now, I'm just trying to give you sincere advice, CE. In Hong Kong, we act in accordance with the law. Now, I don't think you should continue to give your sincere advice to the CE. Please ask him a question. Now, say, for example, a security guard tells you that the building committee is not giving him market rate, and the building committee hasn't really joined the movement. So what are you going to do? Now, don't tell me that you're trying to help the workers. If you want to really try to help the workers, we should legislate immediately. But we can't have the law read 3 times or the bill read 3 times within the same day in LegCo. If there are these problems, of course, the Labour Department will talk to the employers, and the Labour Department will persuade the employers to pay market rates. But then if employers refuse to do so, then that would be adequate ammunition for us to legislate. But you can't give them immediate assistance. The workers can't be helped immediately. But many employers are scrupulous employers. They are good employers. And I'm sure many employers will immediately follow the policy. We have only a small number of unscrupulous employers. And written contracts of employment should be adopted. And if there are breaches, then enforcement action can be taken. Yes, you may say that the employers may not want to adopt such contracts, and such malpractices will be adequate ammunition for us to pursue the legislative route. Let me say this again. This is not empty talk. If the policy proves to be ineffective, then we will set out to prepare for the introduction of legislation. And at that time, we'll be able to convince those who oppose legislation that, in fact, Hong Kong should really go down the legislative route.
Last question, Mr. Albert Chen. Madam President, I meant to shout the same slogan as Mr. Kwok-hung, but I mean, the Tung Chung residents asked me to put a question. I'm glad that I get a chance here. Your bow tie today is red instead of blue today, and I hope that you would be moving more red, and in order to give more protection to the people. For Tin Shui Wai and Tung Chung, you're going to be doing a lot for the recreational facilities there, and I also heard that you've been instructing your officials to work harder. I mean, you denounce them harder then you get denounced here in LegCo, and I hope that with your denouncing, you would be able to speed up the procedures. In Tung Chung and Tin Shui Wai, new towns, the grassroots people suffering and struggling. In the policy address, there is over 1 million people are living below the poverty line. The policy is completely silent on the measures and initiatives to improve their livelihood. The chief executive seems to be not lifting a finger in the face of people dying. What measures do you have to help the unemployed, the semi-employed, and also the underprivileged to have their lots improved? For those 1 million people who are below the poverty line, what do you have to say to them to offer a crumb of comfort for them so that they don't really have to struggle so badly? Right, in terms of comfort, I don't want to repeat all the measures and facilities for Tin Shui Wai. I'm sure you are aware of them, and all these facilities are being implemented. We are fast-tracking them. I don't propose to be verbose here. In 2007, 2008, all these facilities will be coming on stream in terms of swimming pools and other facilities. They can compare favorably with other districts in Hong Kong. I think to improve the quality of life, it is important for us to offer jobs, to create jobs. So I am concerned about the Labour Department's work in Tin Shui Wai. This is vitally important. I don't think we should get bogged down in any argument over the poverty line. We don't really have any abject poverty in Hong Kong. What's important is to improve the quality of life for the grassroots. It's not a matter of basic livelihood. It's a matter of how we can provide a better life for people. Mr. Chen, with regard to Tin Shui Wai and Tung Chung, I think it's important. A realistic option is to relax the zoning in the vicinity, so that more people, more investments will go in and create more job opportunities. Will you be instructing Mr. Michael soon to create more investment in the vicinity and create more job opportunities? Thanks very much. This is in line with what Mr. Warren Tong said. I bear this in mind. 28 members would like to raise questions. 19 successfully put questions to the Chief Executive. I'm grateful to the Chief Executive for answering the questions in such detail. The Chief Executive will be leaving. Please remain standing. Thank you, Madam President.
我而家宣布休會。
I now adjourn the Council until 11 a.m. on Wednesday, 18th of October 2006.